a warm, loving greetings to all of you. In the name of Almighty God, most kind, most merciful, on behalf of the South Africa-Palestine movement and our co-hosting partners, South Africa in the Making Museum, the space that we are all here today, as well as the KwaZulu-Natal Palestine Solidarity Forum and the SAPM Youth Committee. We in Durban are most privileged that Yusuf from the Global Sumud Flotilla has graced our shore. We would like to give Yusuf a round of applause. And we'd like to say shukran, thank you for your commitment to the solidarity of the people of Palestine. For decades, and I mean for decades, the flotilla has been sailing to break the siege, but we have not been successful. But that does not mean that summer 2026 is the end. We will continue until Palestine is liberated and they receive their freedom. In Yusuf's word, I believe the flame lit in Palestine has exposed the stubborn roots of apartheid and colonial inequalities still choking South Africa. And I don't have to tell many of you, you see right in front of you what's happening in our own country. Breaking the siege, breaking the silence, unleash our diverse power and rise up to defend their system. And I would like to take note that who you see here are our committed solidarity activists who are with us on the street of Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, no matter what the weather. And we like to say, every atom that you contribute towards the freedom of the people of Palestine is our intention, and it is what we can do that's best for all of us and for us as individuals. But if many of you don't know, you can find South Africa-Palestine movement on every social media account. We are not a seasonal activist. We are activists 24/7, working tirelessly to end apartheid, racist, genocide, Israel's closure on the people of Palestine and Gaza. I would like to welcome you. Please feel free, and we are in conversation with Yusuf today. Yusuf has done much, and many of you have heard him on social media. We need to inspire Yusuf, because many of the people in the flotilla have said, we haven't made it. But inshallah, Almighty God willing, you will make it one day. And so, on behalf of all our partners, we'd like to welcome you, and I would like to ask our coordinator, media person, Yesh Davender, who's also been part of the steering committee of the Global Sumud Flotilla South Africa. Yes.
Start off like the basic.
Hey, Yusuf.
We're just going to start off like basically, right? Basic. We're just going to start off with a basic question. In your from your you're involved in global flotilla. From your perspective, what does that flotilla stand for?
Firstly, before we go into that, I'd like to greet and congratulate everyone that's here for showing up in solidarity. And this day, you being here is not in vain, and it will go down in the books of history that these are the people that showed up to do everything in their power to free Palestine, but not only to free Palestine, but to start a movement that frees all oppressed people all around the world. The Global Sumud Flotilla, just the name says a lot. It is a global movement of people choosing Gaza, people choosing Palestine, people choosing and deciding that they will not be silent and complicit. That's what it is, the Global Sumud Flotilla. I'm among 6 South Africans that were there, which I'm happy and disappointed in. Because as South Africans, I believe we should be leading the charge. I believe what our very recent experience of defeating apartheid in South Africa, we should be in our numbers in these movements. Nevertheless, your question was, what does it mean for me? I always say this, that I believe that silence is complicity. And we complicit in many ways. So when you see a movement or an organization of common people taking action, it becomes your moral duty to support it in any way you can. And so I was lucky enough to be amongst those that could physically go and attempt to break that illegal siege and ultimately just take food for the people of Palestine. Movements like this needs to be empowered. Saying that we support such movements but not actively empowering it is a failure on our part. When our sister was doing the introduction, she said something that we have movements in South Africa that are not fly-by-night organizations, that are not seasonal activists that come up. It's time that we unite all of these different organizations into single actionable movements. And for me, that's what I saw the Global Sumud Flotilla as, and that is why I joined.
I know many of you probably know that the participants on the Global Sumud Flotilla were tortured and abducted and abused by the Israeli regime. But I think a very important point that was brought up in the media press conference in Johannesburg was that while you were being tortured and you heard Afrikaans being spoken, and as a South African from democratic South Africa, born into a freedom that people died for, these IOF soldiers, South African IOF soldiers, choose to be in that room. They choose the IOF. They choose that side. What do you call that, and what does it say about what some South Africans think that freedom was actually for? And why is it so much worse than any other IOF soldier from any other country, in your opinion?
Yes. It pains me to tell you that there were people who claimed to be South African in the Israeli occupational forces that were also responsible in torturing us. While we were on the ship with some of the most brutal people that I've ever met, one of the languages that they used amongst themselves was Afrikaans. Now, I'm not saying that every person that speaks Afrikaans is bad, but what I am saying is that as a South African, how is it possible that we fought for freedom? Our parents, our grandparents, the people of this very community, some people sitting here today, fought with their lives, their loved ones, for a free South Africa. And then we go to try and help others around the world, and we find South Africans, people who claimed, a soldier came to me and said that I am South African. How is it possible that we have these people who can say and claim that they are South Africans serving in such a force that wants to exterminate an entire people? And my question is not to you, but my question is to our government. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read enough of the Constitution to know that we have a law that states that no South African can fight in a foreign military. So my question to the government is, Have you looked into this? I've come and I'm giving a first-hand account that I've seen people, and people said to me, these Israeli forces said to me in the words that I am a South African. Is our government doing enough to identify these people? Are these people being stripped of their citizenship? These are questions we need to ask. And not only whether they are being stripped of their citizenship, if they enter our country again, is our government doing everything in their power to arrest these people for breaking the laws in our constitution? And if the answer is no, then our government has failed us. And as a democratic country, we the people have the power to hold our government accountable. So are we doing enough to hold our government accountable?
Okay, just flowing from that last response you gave, right? How do you think that we, based on the inaction that we've seen from, in terms of the prosecution of those serving in the IOF, what do you think, or what is your proposed plan here on how to deal with this?
Has there been anyone that was taken into account? Not to my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong. Does anyone here know of any person that was held accountable for serving in the Israeli army and occupying illegal land and exterminating people? Has anyone heard of any South African being held accountable?
No.
No? So what do we propose? We have, in Africa, South Africa is known to have amongst the best intelligence. Are you telling me that our government is so incompetent that they don't know these people? So is it a question of incompetency or is it a question of complicity? If it's a question of incompetency, then I want to know where our tax money is going. And if it's a question of complicity, then what do we do? Because we're a democratic country. We enable the government. The government doesn't dictate to us how we should live. We enable and we choose the government. So if it is a question of complicity, then it's time for the government to be held accountable. And if that accountability is not done, then it's time to change the government, which is something that we legally and constitutionally have the power to do. Do we have to wait for the next election and ask who's going to fix the pothole? Because I want to ask you, as the people sitting here and the people watching, since when are we as South Africans having discussions about who to vote next, and in the same breath asking about the pothole down the street as the basis of our vote? Is this what many of these freedom fighters that are on these walls fought for? Is this the South Africa that they wanted us to have the democratic right and as voters have the right to vote in a government based on a pothole, or was it about ideology? If we decide in who to vote in next based on the potholes on the street, then I feel like we are spitting on the faces of all of these people that we see around, because they fought with their lives. Many of them lost their lives. Was it for a pothole or was it for the ideology of a free people?
So since we're on the topic of South Africa, South Africa is one of the biggest Israeli regime's coal suppliers. The soldiers who boarded your vessel, the naval ships that surrounded you, the torture boat that you were held in, the port where you were detained and abused, that infrastructure runs in part on South African coal. When you were sitting on that torture boat with IOF soldiers standing over you, did that thought cross your mind? What does it mean to you that South African energy is interiorly connected to what was done to you?
Before we left for the mission, or before we set sail, I hoisted the South African flag, which happened to be one of the biggest flags that was hoisted on any of the ships. And I made a video saying that I am amongst the very few people in the world that can hoist our flag next to the Palestinian flag with pride. I mean, Imagine someone, an American citizen, hoisting an American flag next to the Palestinian flag. It can't be done, or at least not with pride. But as a South African citizen, I was very proud to hoist my flag. And in fact, when I asked my captain, can I put my flag on our boat? He said, what flag is it? And I said, South African. And he said, of course, South African, the Palestinian flag, they should always be together. Because we were fortunate enough as a country to be the first country to take Israel to the ICJ, to go and try and systematically fight their system. And I had the sense of pride throughout the journey that whenever anyone asked me, where am I from? I would say South Africa. And they would hug me with this joy and say that what y'all are doing as a country, we wish and hope that every country would do. At the same time, how is it, with all of this pride, with all of this hope as a South African citizen, I had to also state that we are the country that is supplying majority of the coal that keeps the lights on, majority of the coal that enables the Israeli regime to do what they are doing. There is evidence that our coal is what keeps the lights on in weapons factories. Our coal is what keeps the machines running in weapons factories. The same weapons that was used against me, against the 430 other participants from all around the world, against the Palestinians. So now I'm in an identity crisis. Am I proud of my country, or am I angry at my country? I hold the flag with pride, but do I have to stand in front of my comrades and say, unfortunately, it is also my country that is fueling what is happening to us and what is happening to the people of Palestine? So I feel betrayed by my country. Because, and I always say this, when other countries' people go to protest against the country and they go for a Palestinian protest, it is against their country and against their system. When we protest, it's not against our country, because our country is amongst the most pro-Palestinian countries. But the betrayal, knowing that at the same time, while I have no clear enemy as the state, we are allowing almost 80% of Israel's coal to come from our ports. I looked at the metrics. I have my laptop in front, but I've decided I'm not going to pick it up. In 2025 alone, we exported 1.8 metric tons of coal. 1.8 million metric tons of coal. How? Where is the correlation between us taking them to the ICJ and also enabling the genocide? So if you're asking me what my feeling is, I think it's a feeling of betrayal.
Thank you for that, Yusuf. And what I'd like to know is, from your side here, okay, and dealing again with the issue of coal, how do we escalate pressure? How do we move on government to actually intervene in this matter and take a stance?
I think by me answering it doesn't do justice. Let's look at what these people on the walls did. When they went around the world and they mobilized countries, they mobilized foreign powers, they mobilized the people of the world with a conscience to sanction Pretoria while it was under the apartheid state. The tactics that they used is what we need to relearn. I'm very young. I was not a part of the movements, but we've heard stories. The reason of having these museums, the very place that we're sitting in today, is not for us to come and take pictures and go home. It's for us to learn our history and learn the ways and the tactics that they used. What did they do? They sanctioned, and they got people from around the world to sanction the apartheid government. If it cost them their lives, they blocked it with their heart and body. When we scream slogans on the street and we say that we'll sacrifice our lives for the people of Palestine, we also need to ask, are we willing to sacrifice some time for them? Are we willing to physically go and stand at the port and refuse that coal to leave? Remember, do we have any trade unionists sitting with us? Do we? That's unfortunate. But I'm very sure that there's a lot that supports the cause. We, the people, have the power in our hand. I'm not saying that we should do something illegal, but I'm saying if we have to stand on the rail that the train has to pass with the coal, maybe it's something that we need to do. Because when we look at history, the people on these walls, these are some of the actions that they did. I'm saying that if we have to use the law to our advantage and put up 20 sailboats in front of this massive ship that's carrying millions of tons of coal for Israel, then that's what we have to do. If we are illegally arrested and put into prison, then we'll serve the time. Because that's what the situation demands of us. The time of standing in the streets and chanting slogans is over. If all of us are sitting here today to listen to a conversation and then go home to our normal lives, then we're all wasting our time. We should leave now. Because if we do not leave here with a clear strategy of action, then what's the use of chanting slogans and putting up a social media post? I'm not saying it's not important. Every action is important, but that's not where it stops. If we can put up a social media post, then I'm sure we can take to the streets. And if we can take to the streets, I'm sure we can go and physically block what enables the genocide in Palestine.
So I want to take us back to your experiences in at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces and the Israeli regime, and I want you to share with the audience, and you have shared, but I really want you to share what happened, what they did, their cruelty, their brutality, and this is to activists that knew they were going home, that they knew that had consular services and had people on the other side supporting them and posting on social media and making a noise about their abduction. And what does that tell you about what they do to the Palestinians that have no voices? The more than 10,000 that are held in administrative detention in Israeli jails, of which 400 or more are children. How has that changed you in understanding the Palestinian cause? Because of course you were an activist before you left, but coming back from that sort of experience and being at the hands of this murderous regime would have changed you. And yeah, you can just share the audience from interception.
Before I share my experience, you mentioned before I left I was an activist, and coming back, I always say I'm not an activist. I'm a common South African citizen with a conscience. And the reason for that is, it's either we're all activists or none of us are activists. We don't need people who identify as an activist to fight systems of oppression. We just need free people from all walks of life to fight oppression. I am sitting among some of the greatest activists that I know, and they'll tell you that it is a demanding job. That tells you everything. But we need them to coordinate it. We need them to coordinate our actions, our thought process. But we need common people, whether you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a teacher, to play your part in fighting the systems of oppression. And I saw this during my journey. Majority of the people that I was with, 430 people, they were not activists. They were common people. I met a woman from Finland, and she told me something that really stuck with me. She said that, and this is from a Islamic perspective because she was a Muslim, and she said that when she told the men around that she's going for this mission, they asked her, "You're a teacher and you're a mother. Why are you putting your life at risk? You have a duty to your kids. You have a duty to the kids that you teach." And she told them that if there were enough men in the Ummah, which is the people, the Muslims of today, then I wouldn't have to risk my life. And it sent chills down my spine because I asked myself, are we doing enough? And let's take it away from the Islamic context. Yes, she was a Muslim and she was speaking to me, so we had an understanding. But I think from the 430 of us, there were more women than men. And this is something that I'm really proud of, but it's also scary. Because as men, how do we allow oppression to reach a point and do nothing about it, that woman has to come out and put their lives at risk and go up against an entire military? There's something wrong. I'm not saying that women are any less than men, but they have a role which is far superior than men. They have the role as women to instill the courage and nurture us to become the fighters of freedom. How do we allow them to stand in front of a man, an Israeli man that will torture them? We had, going to my experience that you asked me to share, you know what was the hardest for us to experience? Sitting behind a wall that we can't do anything while women were being raped, screaming. This is not a story. I've seen it and heard it with my own eyes and ears. When we were on the water, we left as citizens of different countries, as common people. None of us, or majority of us, were not sailors. We've never had experience on the ocean before. We've never had experience on vessels before. We had to learn it in a few days. We had to learn what life on a boat is. And while it may sound rosy, many people were seasick. Many people had to make great sacrifices. We had to decide who cooked, who cleaned, and who steered the boat. I was sent and appointed as a boat organizer. One of my duties was to create schedules. And on a lighter note, I had a brother with me from America. And I asked him, "Why are you not eating?" And he told me, "I don't know how to cook." But my point of mentioning this is that we had people from all different types of backgrounds with no experience on the ocean, including myself. I've never been more than a 4-hour boat ride leaving from Durban Harbor. I've never been on the ocean before. So I had to learn so much. And while navigating the difficulties just of the logistics of being on a boat, carrying aid and food, we had to worry about being intercepted by one of the most advanced militaries of the world. The days prior to us leaving, we prepared the boats and we loaded aid. I'm a witness, and I've even videoed, because I know that the Israelis always say that we're not actually carrying aid and we're carrying weapons or drugs. We've seen this in the media. So I have a video of us loading the boat full of humanitarian aid. And what was that? It was things like rice, beans, baby formula, medical supplies. And I remember we were told that most of these interceptions take place at night because they use the night as cover for their crimes. But how blatant have they gotten that this time they started in the morning. After a long 12-hour shift up on deck, I went to sleep. And not even an hour later, someone comes and wakes me up and says, "It seems like there's a military vessel ahead of us." So my boat, for those that were following, was called Munki. We were amongst the first boat that they tried intercepting. So I go up on deck and I'm looking and I see one military vessel, two. After about 30 minutes, I see the third and fourth. And I start messaging into the group to the organization, and I say that this is what we see, we don't know who it is, it might be someone doing a drill on the ocean. And as we send in these messages, we see drones above us and 3 Zodiacs, which is speedboats, coming at us fast. As they came closer, they pointed weapons at us, assault rifles, different weapons. And somehow we were able to evade. They tried latching onto our boat and they failed, and they decided, let us go to the main fleet because we were far ahead and we'll come back. So we evaded them for about 14 hours and we kept our course to Gaza because we said we will not falter and alter our course because we know why we're going. It is to deliver humanitarian aid, nothing else. During that time, we saw videos. We saw the reports coming in of 1, 2, 50, 100, about 52 vessels being intercepted. And with great sadness, because these are our comrades. We spend time with them. We know them. They are amongst the best people that I've met, the most kind-hearted, most selfless people. And the videos that we saw was shocking. As they were boarding the boat, they were really violent, shoving assault rifles into these people's faces. We didn't even have a stick to defend ourselves. But what we did have was the hope and the courage of the whole world. And eventually, when they came onto my boat, I had this feeling of sadness, of anger, that I'm not able to even take a can of beans or a bottle of water to the people of Palestine, because I'm being stopped by one of the most advanced armies of the world. We had a drone, a massive drone above us with a floodlight that lit up as far as we could see around us. And we had these Zodiacs come at us and they boarded the boat, put us on the floor. It was really cold on the ocean, and they removed whatever layers we had and left us with only the thinnest t-shirt and a single pants. We were not allowed to carry our shoes, and we were loaded onto these boats. And while being loaded onto these boats, they destroyed our boat. They destroyed the engine, they cut the sails, and they left the boat on the ocean. And they proceeded to take us to a jail ship, or as I like to call it, the torture ship. And up until then, we were really calm because we were trained, in our training prior to leaving, we were constantly drilled that we are a peaceful mission. If we are intercepted, put your hands up, don't retaliate, because we are peaceful humanitarians, we're not fighters. But we were treated worse than terrorists. As I entered this boat, I was kicked to my face and dragged from underneath my arm with my head to my knees, and I was forced to walk. And as I'm walking, you can't look up, so I'm looking at the floor, and I see droplets of blood. And if anyone has ever been to a slaughterhouse, that's what it felt like. And my passport was taken, and I remember the soldier saying, South Africa, ICJ, with a smirk on their face. And while I'm standing there beyond a door, I can hear someone howling and screaming of pain. It was a blood-curdling scream. And in the moment, I'm asking myself that what lies behind this door. Eventually, when that door was opened and I was pushed through, I had exactly 2 seconds to look around. It was a dark metal container, and there were 6 to 8 Israeli soldiers. And I was then beaten up. And because I'm really small, instead of absorbing the full impact of the punch, I was pushed from wall to wall. And during that time, we were electrocuted, sometimes with tasers and sometimes with other devices. And eventually thrown out onto a courtyard that was made of concrete and metal shipping containers. My t-shirt was torn. And as I go onto the other side, I see the rest of my comrades with bloody noses, broken ribs, hurt and broken in many ways. But still they grabbed me as I was thrown in, hugged me, And we had medics with us because their mission was to go to Gaza and help the kids and help the people that are sick and injured. So they were with us, but with no equipment, no medication. Those that were broken and had broken ribs and were hurt in ways that were life-threatening, they tried stabilizing them. They tried making them comfortable. And I remember there was a woman with broken ribs, and they begged for medication, just pain medication. And she was really old. So a soldier says, come, I'll give you medication. And she had 3 broken ribs. He puts his hand on the ribs and presses in and says that that's the medication you deserve. So this was the brutality that we saw on the ship. We were not allowed to sleep. Every hour, and during the nights, they would have these really bright flashlights that would constantly flicker, and there were sounds that were played that it almost sounded like it's coming from inside your head. The minute they saw us huddling together, because a lot of people were suffering from hypothermia, they would spray us with water cannons and throw flashbangs. And in those moments, even though it was only 2.5 days, it felt like forever. Eventually, we were taken to Israel, or actually occupied Palestine. Ashdod port, and again treated like animals and taken to the soil, put down for hours with our hands tied up on our knees and head. And that is where we heard South African soldiers, or Israeli soldiers that are South African speak. We heard the Afrikaans, and one even came to me and said, I am South African, with a smirk on his face. You could see it through the eyes. And constantly they said things like, or they questioned us, why did you come to Israel? And we said, we didn't come to Israel, we were going to Gaza. And you kidnapped us on international waters, hundreds of kilometers away. And one of them said these words, the whole world is Israel. That's their mentality, and that's what they've been brought up with. From there we were processed, but you would think a process of paperwork. It was a process of torture. Every stop that we made, we were humiliated, we were stripped naked, we were beaten up. And that's how we had to get through this day, and eventually put onto buses, but not buses that you're thinking of. It was more like coffins, metal coffins, with our legs and hands shackled. And before this, there was an immigration officer who said, if you sign these papers, you can go home. So I asked, tell me what the papers are. It was a confession that we are terrorists and we've entered Israel illegally and we were caught. We were kidnapped on international waters and brought to Israel. Why were we asked to sign a confession that we are terrorists? So we refused to sign, and with every time we refused, we were beaten up. Eventually we were put on these buses and taken to the prison, Kitsiot prison. And during this time, one form of torture that they thought would mess with us was making the aircon really hot and then really cold. We don't know the time of the day. We barely even knew what day it is. And now you're sitting there and you're either suffocating out of heat or you're shivering. And we're taken to the prison, moved around 20 cells. And every time, because a lot of times our head was to our knees, and that's how we were walked. Every time we lost hope, it was as if the Palestinians were there for us, not the other way around, because they wrote things on the walls that gave us strength. We knew that we had international solidarity. We knew that we had some sort, and we hoped that we had some sort of diplomatic protection. But the Palestinians that wrote things on the walls were writing it in desperation, not knowing if they'll ever see outside those walls. So when we looked at that, it gave us the strength to continue. Eventually, we were put in front of a judge. And again, we were told, do you want to go home? We said yes. They asked us, do we have a valid passport? We said yes. Will you sign a confession? And we said no. And so we didn't know if we would be there for a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. And eventually, after 2 days in prison with no food, or food that was not fit for human consumption, and water that looked, apart from it being brown, it seemed as if it had a layer of oil, which again was not fit for human consumption, and not knowing whether you'd ever see outside these walls was truly mentally breaking. But we were fortunate enough that through your solidarity, through the solidarity of the world, we were released and we were taken on a Turkish Airlines flight. And I remember getting the first meal. While we had a sense of joy that we'd seen real food after many days of not eating, there was a sadness that how is it that we are going to eat this meal that we really wanted, knowing that we could not even deliver a single bottle of water to the people of Palestine. And that was my experience while being there.
Thanks a lot for that, Yusuf. I'm just going to another topic here, right? And it relates to this issue of international solidarity, the comrades that you made on this mission here. Can you just explain to us here on the issue of Pan-Africanism, which is a is a topic that's at the forefront of discussions in South Africa right now, with the xenophobic pressures that we're feeling. Now, how important is this issue of Pan-Africanism to the Palestinian cause, and what is the link between it?
I want to go back to our own history. How did South Africa get its freedom? And I want everyone to take a moment and think about it. I see there's a lot of elderly men and women sitting here. And you probably know better than me. But South Africa didn't achieve its freedom on its own. It was supported from across the globe, especially other African nations and other African states. When Mandela was given a passport from Ethiopia, and I think his name at that time on the passport was Anthony something, yes? That is what allowed him access to go and mobilize the support of the people. When Nigeria set up a voluntarily tax called the Mandela tax, where common people were able to donate a part of their salary towards the freedom of South Africa, that is what contributed to South Africa's freedom. When Tanzania, using their sovereign land, set up a base for the ANC to operate from, that is what led to the freedom of South Africa. When Mozambique harbored our activists and kept them safe while taking hits and air raids from the apartheid South Africa, that is what ultimately allowed us as South Africans to be sitting here in our diversity. So when you're asking about Pan-Africanism, I don't think I would be allowed to even walk on this land if it wasn't for Pan-Africanism. I don't think that I'd be having this conversation with a mic in my hand if it wasn't for the support from other African nations. And this is why it is so important for us to stand together as a continent, the richest continent on the planet, yet the most persecuted continent. They are extremely afraid, and when I say they, I'm talking about the imperialist forces. I don't want to say the West, but rather the imperialist forces that thrive off our divide. The most scary thing for them is the day that Africa unites as one and fights their systems. Because it is not Africans who underneath the soil we walk and has the most richest minerals that benefit from these minerals. but rather it is corporations that are based far, far away that exploit these. Look at Congo. Congo is basically a huge mining dump where the people of the land, the people of the soil are forced to work in these mines for nothing, barely their human rights. How is it that the people of the land is exploited and they get no benefit from the work that they do? We need to ask ourselves this. If the African continent came together and we supported one another, what would this continent be? We would be the driving force of the world. Everyone says that China is the greatest exporter of the world. I reject that statement. Because everything that China exports, most of the raw resources comes from right here, this very soil in Africa. No country in the world has a diversity and a community of people from different races, religions, and creeds living together the way we have it in South Africa. We have neighbors from different races that celebrate important days together with great happiness, and this is something that they're afraid of. I want to bring it back to something that we saw a few months ago when Donald Trump said that there's a white genocide taking place in South Africa. I want to ask the people sitting here, has anyone seen this happen? Is anyone a witness to a white genocide in South Africa? No. I've asked many people this question, and they always dismiss it with a laugh. Because this was something that they tried and they failed so amazingly, actually, that it became a laughing stock of Donald Trump and his people. They called a white genocide in South Africa the biggest issue of the world. Their statements. Go and look it up. And the very white people that live in South Africa, that are our brothers and sisters, that we live in harmony with, said that no, we don't know of any of this. And so it was rejected. They realized that they can't break the country in that manner. So what they did, they invested probably millions of rands, if not dollars, into something that we see now, the xenophobic attacks. And mind you, it's not xenophobic attacks, it's more Afrophobic. Why? Because if it was xenophobic, then most of the corporations that are still owned from the days of apartheid would be the first people that would be in the line of fire. But why is it that it is our own African brothers from our neighboring countries that are being targeted? I'm not saying that as a sovereign country we should allow illegal immigrants to come in undocumented and unchecked. But does that call for a persecution and violence on people? No. Borders is the first element of the colonial state. There was no borders before. Many, many years ago, I don't think people had these borders where you had to have a piece of paper or a passport to pass through. It was just people living and cultivating their land, making the best that they could out of what they had. So we have borders. We've recognized borders. But does that mean that we should harm and kill people because they come from across the border? No. So to your question of Pan-Africanism, it is the single solution that fixes every problem that we have. The day that Africa is united is the day that all of us sitting here, all of us in this country, all of us in this continent will truly achieve freedom. And so I think it's important for each and every one of us to carry this message, to carry the spirit of Ubuntu, to carry the spirit of togetherness in our homes, in our communities, in our streets. I want to mention a very quick incident that happened this week in Pretoria, my hometown. There was a temple that was unfortunately harmed, in the sense of some graffiti was written on this temple. I see many people from different religions sitting here today. Durban has a huge Hindu population as well as a Muslim population. Has there ever been a time that we felt on either side that there's a hatred and divide amongst us? Or did we fight in the struggle together? On the day of Eid, do we not celebrate together? On the day of Diwali, do we not celebrate together? Growing up, I know on the days of Diwali, we waited for the barfi to come to our house. And on the days of Eid, our parents sent us to our Hindu or any neighbor to give them, because we all live together. And this was an unfortunate incident which everyone came out to condemn. People in churches spoke up against it. People in temples spoke up against it. People in mosques spoke up against it. But it sparked international interest, where they said that, look, in this community, there's this group of people being harmed. Why? Because they know they cannot take this country from outside forces. So they're planting these little seeds from inside to divide us. And if we fall prey to this, we are signing our own death warrants. This is the time for us to come together, stand hand in hand. We still have our freedom to practice our own religions and beliefs. But when it comes to the issue of this country and going forward as a country, as a people, we need to hold hands together and walk forward in taking this country forward. So again, not just Pan-Africanism, but just within our communities, we need to build unity.
Okay, I want to take you to the fact of a question that is often brought up. You saw what the Israeli regime does to people that try to show up for Gaza. You also experienced it firsthand, and as I said, they knew you were coming back to tell your story. So it's far worse than we can possibly ever imagine for the Palestinians. But I have the biggest problem, and I don't want to bring it as a divide, but I, as a Muslim woman in South Africa, have a problem with my younger Muslim community, people of your age. Because so much, I think our lives have become so entrenched on social media that we feel like sharing a post or WhatsApping a post and forwarding a post is doing something, is making some sort of impact. And yes, social media has made some impact, but it does not replace the physical people on the streets, people on the boats, people on the land, people taking every stance to break the siege, to not allow the Zionist imperialism and the US imperialism to continue, which is clearly affecting us in various other ways, as we've now just discussed. What do you say to them? What do you say to youth that are definitely born free, that were born 10 years, 20 years after apartheid ended, after freedom reigned? What do you say to them? And what is their obligations in standing up for the oppressed of the world?
First of all, I know you said you look in at the Muslim community. I don't think we should be asking just the Muslim community what they're doing. This is an issue of humanity, of human rights of all. And so the question that we need to ask is, what is all people around the world? Or let's start off in our community. What are people in our communities, in our country, doing, and what should they be doing? First of all, and I know some people are disappointed if they hear this. By sharing a social media post, you have not fulfilled your duty as a human being. You have not. It is an important but very small gesture and should not be seen as the end of where your activism stops. Has anyone here sitting here been to a Palestinian march? Anyone? How many thousands of people have you seen there?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes? Hundreds of thousands. So you asking about people that just post. I want to move it down to the people that even show up for the marches.
Not enough.
It's not enough, but there's hundreds of thousands of people. My question is, what are those hundreds and thousands of people doing after they show up? I was with some of the greatest activists from around the globe, and I learned something. One of the guys on the boat with me told me that he just came out of a 152-day protest where he slept on the port to allow a single ship to come into the port of Turkey. And he stayed on that port for 152 days until that ship was allowed. Not just him, but many people. So I want to tell you that if you are going to a protest outside the embassy and it says on the poster from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, you're making a mockery out of yourselves. Let me tell you why. I'm not saying that we don't appreciate the people that come out. But when the people inside that embassy, they look at the clock on the top, which was made with African resources, which is ticking with lithium that was mined in Africa by exploited people, and they see that the time is 3:30, they look at each other and laugh and say, we have 30 minutes more of these fools. So is that what we want to do? Is that the action that we want to take, where we say we're going from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock to fight oppression around the world? We're taking 2 hours to fight oppression and the killing and the persecution of people. Is that our duty? Is that our moral duty? No. But there's a system and structure that needs to be put in place first. Yes, I understand that we all have jobs. I told you I'm not an activist. I'm a common citizen with a job, with bills to pay at the end of the month, many months, counting my last cents, trying to make it through the month, just like many people, or the majority of South Africans. So do I have 152 days to stand in protest? I don't. And let me tell you why. Because if I do that, what will happen to my family? I rent a house. What will happen to that house? So it's an entire system that needs to be built in order to truly take action. You asked about social media posts. We need them firstly on the streets. After they're on the streets, it doesn't stop there. We need to take direct action. If we cannot take 152 days in protest and build a structure where we have wealthy businessmen that also screams and chants free Palestine and we will do everything. I'll give you an example, just in terms of an idea that I have in my mind. For a business that has many workers, they pay salaries, right? If every business that says that we stand with Palestine or stands with the oppressed around the world pays one more salary for someone that's not working, they effectively enable a person to become a full-time activist. That's all they have to pay, one salary. If we have 100,000 businesses that can pay a stipend or a single, what they would pay to a worker, which I'm quite sure they can. I mean, we've seen the financial readings, we look at the stock markets. If that's just an idea of a system, obviously it's much easier said than done. But it's possible. Think of how simple it is. Every business supports one activist fully, financially, and now they become a full-time activist that doesn't have to worry about their family back home, how they will eat, so that they can go and stand on the front lines. What we need is direct action. The days of spreading awareness is over. For those who didn't get the message by now, it's either we done a terrible job by spreading awareness, or they were just not receptive enough to listen. Everyone knows what Israel is. Everyone knows what the imperialist forces are. So by standing out, and I'm not saying we should stop these protests or these marches or what I call a demonstration, because it's not really a protest. We should continue it, but that should be the breeding ground of planning actions. Yesh was telling me if people want to get involved, they have a weekly picket. How many people come to that picket?
20 to 30.
20 to 30.
On a good week.
On a good week.
On a good week. So, yes, I don't go to a weekly picket because I have a job and I understand that most people sitting here have the same issue. But 20 to 30 people, are you telling me that there isn't more people that has the time? Are you telling me that we cannot enable more people? But in my opinion, and maybe Yash will disagree with me, I see the picket as something that doesn't make a direct impact, but what it can be is the place for people to come and make contact with people like Yash, with people that have structures in place that needs the manpower. So if every week we have 20 new people at this picket and they give their details and they join groups and they join discussions and conversations and they mobilize into action, then that weekly picket becomes a success. But if it's the same 20 people that's going there every week and they're not bringing their friends and their neighbors, then we are wasting our time. I was the first person when we got to South Africa to say that we failed in our mission. And let me tell you why we failed. We didn't fail because we couldn't make it to Gaza with the humanitarian aid. We failed because we couldn't mobilize enough support for our mission. We failed because we did not bring our family, our neighbors, their neighbors, and our communities onto this mission. Out of the hundreds and thousands of people you said that you saw standing out in protest, why was there 430 people on the boats? Why? Yes, many people did send through their application, but we didn't have capacity because we didn't have the funds for more boats. So I'm saying in South Africa alone, leave the global solidarity networks. Just in South Africa, are you telling me we cannot get enough funds for 100 boats? It took them 28 to 29 hours to intercept all of the boats, and the last boat was 4 hours away. 4 hours away from being successful in their mission. Had we had double of what we had, 4 hours was nothing. Are you telling me that the people sitting here don't know enough people on their contact list? If I go on my contact list, I'm pretty sure I have more than 1,000 people. So I'm also guilty. But if all of us have more than 1,000 people on our contact list, are you telling me that each one of us sitting here today cannot find 2 people to support or join the mission? That is why we failed. Not because the mission was a failure. The mission has built structures for international solidarity. So now the next time someone is talking about, we want to put together a few boats to go and break the siege, it doesn't have to be a new thing. We have the structures, the media structures that's already in place with hundreds and thousands of followers. We have the legal structure in place to assist us legally. We have the logistics structure in place with people from around the world that understands logistics, that already has seen through this mission what needs to change for the next one. The only thing that's missing is getting your support. The only thing that's missing is for all of us to mobilize the people we know in support of this mission. That's the only component that's missing to make this a successful mission. Yesh is a lawyer. He told me he had to learn social media. Why? Because he understood that there's a gap in what needs to be done, and he went ahead and he learned it to the best of his capability, and now he's using that platform. But I'm asking you, does none of us know someone that already understands the systems and the structures of social media? Can we not bring them on board? That is our failure. The day that we fix that and we can mobilize the people around us in our direct circle, in our own communities, is the day that we have successfully broken the imperialist forces. And I hope that answers your question of what do we need to do. We need to motivate and we need to support the people that come out. We need to give them our full support in our own little faculties of life. For example, if we have a lawyer that supports the mission, they need to support the activist. Very quickly, to end this off, I'll tell you about something I saw in this week. So I came back and PSA said that, listen, there's some students, university students that's going, having a little picket, not even a picket, a demonstration, holding up placards on a public road outside the university. Could I go? I had the time and I said, let me go. I get there and I see private security harassing these students to stop them from standing on a public road, not disrupting anyone, holding placards. And they're saying that it's illegal and they will arrest them and they must leave immediately. And they're citing laws that don't exist. One of them said that this private security officer says that I'm almost the government. And I heard this with my own ears. It's not from second party. And so I have been mandated to stop any such protests or demonstrations. So I stepped in because I think this is something that we should all know, our basic rights in this country. And I said that, listen, first of all, we have about 20 people. So if you're asking for a permit, I think you're mistaken. Nevertheless, you're a security officer from a private firm. So please escalate it and bring SEPs, because maybe they understand our rights better. Second of all, we are doing nothing disruptive that you can stop us from. And so they started arguing, and people are now like, we don't want to get arrested. But eventually, one of their bosses came and said that, oh, okay, no, you know what, it's fine. Because now he saw that the people there don't know, they're not unaware of their rights. My point was, after that, what we needed to do was break the systems from the inside. So we need to write a formal complaint, because it is within our full right, and we were there in our full rights. We done nothing illegal. We needed to write a formal complaint, and if possible, if we had someone that was willing to give us legal assistance, you press for charges. Why do you do this? It's not about being petty. Yes, they allowed us eventually, but it's about breaking the systems from the inside. The fact that they tried to stop us, we need to show that we know our rights as South Africans, and we will fight for those rights, and we will arm ourselves with political knowledge and arm ourselves with the constitutional knowledge of the law. And once we have that, it will be very difficult for them to continually harass us. And then we will be able to grow these movements into something bigger. And so I ask every one of us sitting here today, how can we support the few people that actually go out? Arm them with knowledge. Arm them financially if needed. Stand together in your own profession and fight the systems from inside. And that's my answer.
Actually, I really want to bring something up about on social media, and majority of it is Hazra, it's Zionist plots and bots and whatever it may be. But they are pushing this narrative that the Global Sumud South Africa was paid by the taxpayer, paid by the government with taxpayer money. Now, I was the head of fundraising for the steering committee for the Global Sumud South Africa. So I know that's not true, but I want you to speak about how monies were raised and to an extent also the lack of funds that were raised, because this was a call that was put on far and wide. It was a call that I myself personally put on multiple Palestine solidarity groups. And yes, some people sitting in this audience did donate, but if every single person, some of these groups have up to 800, 900 participants, If every single person donated 10 rand, or even 5 rand, how much more would we have been able to send at South Africa? How many more people would we have been able to put on these boats? Because there is something about numbers and capacity. We can only put 6 activists because we don't have a boat of our own. We don't have funds to buy boats in the €1,000,000 that it costs to buy a vessel to put it on the sea. And to know that it's going to get intercepted. But as Yusuf said, if we had 100,000, if we have 100 boats or 200 boats, how will they intercept 200 boats? Because they suffered with 50. It wasn't as easy as it was last year. So, but I just wanted to talk about the tax.
I saw those comments. In fact, if you go on Delco's Facebook page and they have a write-up about us, and you click the comments, the first thing that pops up is, first of all, oh, this was paid with taxpayers' money. What a waste of our money. I almost didn't go on this mission because I didn't have the funds and we couldn't raise enough funds for us to go. You worked. There was times we would communicate at 3 a.m. trying to calculate, someone donated 200 rand, does it cover enough to make a flight? I went myself to people of my community and I said, we need to cover flights and the flights need to be booked today. And if I don't cover it, I won't be able to go on this mission. One of my comrades and brothers is sitting here who worked tirelessly with his family, his contacts, and they also funded some of the money. So when people say it was funded by the taxpayers' money, let me tell you, it's unfortunate. But it may be fortunate also to break the narrative that even our flights to come back after being illegally kidnapped and detained was paid by our own money or private citizens' fundraising. Not a cent that I know of from our government. So I wish that our government supported us financially, but they didn't. Not 1 cent. So the people who say that the South African government wasted their taxpayers' money on this mission are very much mistaken. And I challenge them to find evidence of a single cent that came from the South African government, that came from the taxpayers' money in this mission. Another thing I want to speak about, and I already touched on it briefly, of how if businesses paid one salary towards activists, we would change the entire narrative and game altogether. But I want to ask the people sitting here and the people watching, did you do your duty by sharing the message when we were asking for funds? And if the answer is no, you did not speak to every person that you met and you did not put it out far and wide, then how do you expect us to be successful in these missions and eventually come to a point that we see a free Palestine, and not only a free Palestine but a free people all around the world? There are people with great ideas, not me, but I've met activists that have great ideas that will change the landscape altogether, but they cannot execute because of lack of funds. Is it so difficult that while we flaunt our money on baseless things and we spend millions in owning the cause, always wanting to own the cause? We've seen thousands of organizations pop up in the last few years that claim to be supporting Palestine. And I'm not saying that they're not. My issue is that they don't want to work together. So are you, as the head of this organization, doing it for the people of Palestine, or are you doing it for yourself? Are you working for the cause, or are you trying to own the cause? These are questions we need to ask. And if we stop spending so much of money on branding and making sure that our logo is on this post and we will not support this if my logo is not on this post, and we put together all of these funds to actually fix what we say that we stand in for, we will make a difference.
Thanks a lot for that, Yusuf. I think that is a very important message that actually needs to be distributed on this. I'm going to go into something else here, right? And I know that the discussion might be a bit disjointed for people, but what I want to ask you about is, I've taken a perspective and I've actually addressed gatherings on this. And I know that there are a lot of Muslim people here, but this is it's a more diverse gathering than is normally traditionally presented. And I put forward a view, and I know that it might have touched on certain raw nerves, but I have put forward a view that support among the Muslim community is tapped out at this point. Right? We've maximized the support that we are getting. We obviously have to do work to get more. But if you had to leave aside the traditional Muslim base that supported Palestine, and based on your experiences on international solidarity, and I know Nkosi Zulu is in this house here, and if he arrived on time, he'd be sitting in the front helping to answer these questions. Nkosi is another one of our flotilla delegates. Yes, he's sitting at the back there. He should be in the front, but he's lurking in the back. But my question to you is, how do you see us moving towards a more diverse support base for the Palestine cause, and in South Africa against the anti-imperialist agenda that we are seeing emerging right now?
I think it goes back to just what each individual believes. My question is, how is it so many years after apartheid in South Africa we still have such a high level of inequality? Right? I stay in Johannesburg. If any of you have been, and you know the most flashy part of Johannesburg is Sandton. Right opposite is what? Alexandria, a township. I was asked, I don't know Durban that well, so I was asking my father-in-law who's sitting here today, in Durban do we have a similar thing? And he said, yes, look at Umlazi. And 5 or 10 minutes away is what? Umhlanga, right?
Phoenix and Umhlanga.
Look at Phoenix and Umhlanga. A few minutes away.
KwaMashu and Umhlanga as well.
KwaMashu and Umhlanga. So how is it that being a democratic country, we still have this level of inequality? How? What went wrong? Because from what I understand, from my parents and the elders, when they fought for freedom, they fought for equal rights and equality amongst all who live in the country. So where did we go wrong? Why is it that in such close proximity we have the total opposites of living conditions? On one side we have houses that are too big for people to clean, and on the other side we barely have a house that can hold the amount of people that's living inside. There's something systematically wrong with this. So when you're asking about how do we mobilize people and how do we get the funds to fix the issues in Palestine, we need to start at home. When we have the tens and thousands of people on the street that come out to scream free, free Palestine, we need that same tens and thousands of people to walk into the township, use some of their wealth, whether it's 2.5% or 5% of everything that they have, to fix area by area, neighborhood by neighborhood. And believe me, I know it's easier said than done. but it's not impossible. If we cannot go and fix it, can we say that everyone sitting here after this would go on the beachfront and pick up litter? Because that is what contributes to making this a better country. So it's possible. If you see a packet of dirt on the floor and you pick it up and put it in the bin, you've now been a part of fixing your country. So we need education, and we need leadership and structure. When we're organizing these marches and we're asking everyone to come out, wear your scarves, yes, this is an act of resistance. This is an act of unity. But this is a piece of cloth that means nothing. It only holds power when we use our hands to change something that we see that is wrong. What's the use of wearing this? Nothing. It's nothing. So if we can wear this, but we can't embody what it symbolizes, then we're wasting our time. Don't defame this. I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not saying that I'm doing great work and where's everyone else, but I'm saying that it's time to change. When we speak of the African revolution, maybe it doesn't need to be with weapons. Maybe it needs to be with bricks. Maybe the African revolution doesn't need to be about fighting each other, but it needs to be with bricks, cement, and building materials. Because that is the next revolution for Africa, where we don't need to hold guns in our hands, but we need to hold spades, and we need to build an Africa. So the next time, and yes, I leave this with you and anyone else here that helps organize these marches, let the marches be a place for people to gather. But from the place of gathering, let us take actions. Let us clean the streets. Let us fix something that we see. If we know that there's a house, that is a 2-bedroom house holding 8 people, and those people don't have the funds to build more, can we not put together enough people to go and say that we will build the house with our own hands? We will make a difference for these 8 people. And let me tell you what happens when that happens. Those same 8 people that are now empowered, that can live peacefully, that they will help the next. And this becomes a constant effect. So it's possible. Again, I say this, that I know it's easier said than done. But the fact that few people, which I'm also disappointed at, that there's so few people at this gathering, but the few people here, we can make a difference. We can start the African revolution by building, by paving, by fixing, neighborhood by neighborhood. Let's start in our own communities. How many of us, and this is something I suffer with a lot, and I always bring this up, how many of us don't know our neighbors that live 2 houses away? How many of us? I see there's a lot of old people, so I think they know their neighbors that live 2 houses away. But for me,
my neighbors are dentists and doctors' surgeries.
where, we have this issue of mental health that everyone loves speaking about. This issue wasn't there 50 years ago. Let me tell you why, and this is my opinion. It's because communities live together. They say it takes a village to raise a child. It's true. The reason why children are so disconnected from communities and from people in today's time is because from they're born, they put in a nanny's hand, or they put in one house and they isolate it. Where is the spirit of Ubuntu when we have our kids playing together outside? Our excuse is because of the crime. Fine, it's true. So what are we doing about it? We need to find the roots of the issues. If crime is an issue, it's because there's poverty. If poverty is an issue, it's because there isn't enough food. And if there isn't enough food, we need to ask ourselves, do we have the means to change that? Instead of giving 5 rand to a person on the road, if we took all of those 5 rands and we bought a farm that farmed food, and that was then distributed, we would fix the issue of poverty. But the government doesn't want that. They should be spearheading these programs. They're giving 350 rand or 370 rand in this SRD grant for years now. I had a conversation from one of the politicians in, I think it's Rise Mzansi, who is very passionate about the issue of gambling. And in their opinion, they said that the state might have just funded the rise and the boom of the gambling industry. Why? Because you and I sitting here today know that can we live with 370 rand a month? Any one of us here can put up our hands and say that I can live with 370 rand a month? No. So what happens is, they collect that, they see a flashy advertisement that says you could win millions, and then they use that money into that. So it ultimately comes back to the government. The government is giving, maybe it's all they can give, maybe that's their capacity, but I don't think the funds are being used correctly. If that money was put together in each community, and there was a community farm, a community place to grow food, animals, we'd fix the issue of poverty. It seems simple, but are we willing, the people sitting here, willing to spearhead these programs? So I'm saying that every time we have a Palestine march, it needs to come with action. We need to get those people involved in community work here at home. And that is how we'll spread our successes across the globe. We as South Africans sometimes feel like we are no one in the world and we wait for the West to set examples. But it's time for us to rise. It's time for us to begin the revolution. And again, I say the revolution with bricks, spades, and building material, not with weapons.
Yeah, see, Nasia abdicated responsibility here. No. Nasia has been running some very heavy schedules and she's a bit drained at the moment, I know. Okay, I'm going to just grab from some of the issues Nasia was intending to address with you, right? And I'm going to bring it back into a South African context because you came from an environment of international solidarity, right? And in our current environment here, where we're seeing the escalation of certain movements associated with xenophobia, right? Can you, from your perspective, can you tell us, from what you've experienced and what we're seeing happening here in South Africa, if we are to look at it in relation to the Palestinian cause and in terms of our own country's development and the trajectory we are on, what do you see the dangers that could be emerging from this, and how do we contain it?
Yash wasn't listening to me, but I answered that already. But I'll briefly go in on it, and it was in the topic of Pan-Africanism. What the imperialist forces are most afraid of is us uniting. I've been, yes, in a space of international solidarity, something that terrifies them. When people from all walks of life, from all religions, from all races, from all creeds, come together to fix one issue, it terrifies them. And that is why they were so brutal to us. Because their hope was we would come back and tell our story and people will say that it's too dangerous, we're not going to do anything. That was their hope. But I think they failed, because I hope that now there are people in this audience that says in their heart that on the next one we will be there. Some of the issues that we're facing in South Africa, I saw a post this morning and I haven't verified it. It was just an Instagram post that there are 500 trucks stuck at the Mozambican border. Why? Because of the rising tensions of xenophobia. The Mozambican border doesn't want to allow South African trucks in protest to come in. South Africa is the gateway of the African continent. It's been said for many, many years. We have some of the best ports where a lot of the imported goods and the exported goods from Africa leaves and comes in from. So if South Africa gets isolated, what would happen to the African continent? All of this is connected. I touched on the Cape Independence movement, where they want to essentially create a different state, an independent state of Cape Town out of South Africa.
Called what, by the way?
The Cape
No, I mean when you were in, what do they call it?
While I was in detention, there was 3 words an Israeli soldier told me. He looked at my passport and he said, South Africa, Cape Town, Israel. I actually want to read a post that I saw Yash shared on his Instagram a few days ago. You have it. And I want to read it word for word so that it doesn't seem like I'm over-exaggerating. And let me tell you where this post is. This post is in a newspaper or an article called The Times of Israel. And I quote, South Africa must lead the way in fragmentation, voluntarily referendum-based independence for historical, ethno-cultural homelands, such as those of the Zulu, Xhosa, Tswana, Sotho, Venda, and Songa, along with the Western Cape, would replace cohesion with genuine consent. A March 2025 poll by Victory Research, commissioned by the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, showed 51% support for a referendum and 43% for independence outright in the Western Cape, underscoring the mounting urgency of consensual separation. This is not regression to tribalism, it is the foundation of legitimate governments, end quote. This is on the Times of Israel. Now I'm asking you, since when is Israel so interested in our internal politics, and why? So I didn't know about this. I was telling someone my story of how they told me that Cape Town is Israel while being in detention. And then they told me about this, and I looked into it, and I was shocked. Because the fact that a common soldier there knows about this, and then we see movements like the Cape Independence movement, I see this correlation, and it makes me worried. Because I've lived in Durban for a few years, I've lived in Johannesburg, and I've also lived in Cape Town. And we've always been free to travel because it's our country. I saw an interview, a very short piece by the guy with the puppet, you know, the common... Conrad Koch.
Yeah.
And he spoke to the head of the Cape Independence movement, and he asked him a question. Would South Africans need a visa to enter Cape Town, or the Western Cape? And he said yes. And so his format is very funny, and he says, well, maybe we shouldn't call it a visa, we should call it a pass. And since you're saying that the rest of South Africa is DOM, we should call it a DOM pass. Now it's funny, but for the people who remember what that symbolized, it should send shivers down your spine, right? So what they really and truly are afraid of is international solidarity. So when we sit here and we look behind us, we have multiple flags behind us. Congo, Cuba, South Africa. One of the criticisms we got at the airport was, why was it one South African flag and more Palestinian flags? I don't see, I feel like the South African flag and the Palestinian flag symbolizes the same thing. But maybe next time we should put more South African flags.
Well, South African flags South African flags carry a black triangle, and we also have red triangles here as well.
That was on a lighter note. But you see, this behind us is what they're afraid of. When we can put our flags together and we can stand together. And I'm very sure in the coming days with this xenophobia propaganda, what we're going to see is countries that has always stood with us now having to pull away. And that is their ultimate goal. If Mozambique, the same country that took bombing attacks for the freedom of South Africa, is now blocking our trucks in protest against us, where have we went wrong? Are we signing our own demise? South Africa has been studied across universities around the world for how we defeated apartheid, for being a rainbow nation. So is now the time that we're going to change our view, or are we going to allow the view of the world to change about us? Or are we going to fight fiercely to maintain that beautiful feeling of Ubuntu, that beautiful feeling of togetherness? So that is international solidarity. And I was with people that were black, white, Indian, indigenous Brazilians, people from the Amazon, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, atheist, and we all stood together with a single mission, a clear goal. And there was something amazing about it. On my boat, they came and they asked permission, because it was a bit of a bigger boat compared to the one that these people had, to hold a little prayer, a Jewish prayer. And we all sat while they were doing their prayer in solidarity. On a Friday, when we would go to mosque, we had Jews, Christians, and atheists follow us to mosque, and they would sit down and watch us pray. That is what solidarity means. I don't have to agree with your beliefs, but I stand in solidarity with you. I stand with you, and I support you, and I give you, and I will protect you while you have the right and you exercise your right to doing what you believe.
Okay, Yusuf, I'm going to round up. I think this is going to be the last question I'm going to ask you, and I think we want to open up the floor for a Q&A session from the attendees here. But what I want to ask you about is, you embarked on this mission as a particular individual with a particular perspective on the world, right? After your experiences on this particular mission, start to finish, from South Africa, going to Ashdod and returning to South Africa, explain to our attendees here, are you the same person that left South Africa, and what, if you are not, what has changed?
No, I'm not. And let me tell you why. Whatever knowledge that I had of the Palestinians, of the freedom fighters around the world, mainly came from this, something that we all have and we see. And I was fortunate enough to be on the ground and have discussions with these great people from around the world that is far more experienced than you and I. And understanding their perspective and understanding their strategies, it most certainly changed me just from that moment. I had discussions with people that I will carry on for the rest of my life, that changed just the way I would interact with people. And it was always discussions about togetherness, community, building something together, living and tolerating each other. These were the discussions we would have. I was in a podcast 2 days ago, and I said that we done training. So the host says, so you done training before this mission. What was some of that training? was it anything to do with suicide bombs and, and combat training? And I said, no. We went on a peaceful mission, a humanitarian mission. So a lot of our training was about how to interact with one another peacefully, how to de-escalate, because when you come from different parts of the world, we all have our cultural backgrounds. And sometimes certain things we don't agree with, but the training was there to explain to us that we need to have togetherness, we need to have tolerance. And the more you learn about other cultures, the more you may not agree, but the more you appreciate it. And that was our training. Majority of our training, which I think I may have some content, or actually I don't because my phone was taken away or we threw it overboard. But you'd see that it was a lot about just interacting with one another, having this human connection with every person you come into contact with. So how it's changed me in that aspect is that now when I interact with someone, I have a lot more to offer and a lot more that I'm willing to learn from them. And then being in illegal detention, being tortured, it made me realize that how important it is for us to continue fighting for what we believe in, to continue fighting for the mere human rights of people. And someone asked me this question, I think in the same podcast, do you think that all Israelis are evil, having been there? No, I don't. Yes, we were met and faced with some of the most brutal and evil of them. But even then, there were some of them that you could see that there was still humanity in them. And I'll give you an example. There was a woman that was almost raped by many men. And she was taken into this room and she was screaming and the door was closed. And an Israeli soldier came in and stopped it and sent her back to where we were. And this proves to me that what we need to do is not fight people, not even the Israeli soldiers. We need to fight the systems that enable this. Some of them looked like they didn't want to be there, but they are put into a system that they cannot escape or they don't see a way to escape. So what we need to do is open up the floor and have these discussions. That's what I learned. You're asking me what I learned? I always just had this feeling of there's good people and there's evil people. But now I think there's a third category. There's good people trapped in an evil system. And we need to be willing to have these conversations. We need to empower those people. We need to enable them to break free from these systems. And that's something that I think has changed in my mind that would never have if I hadn't been on this mission.
Thank you a lot for that, Yusuf. I'm going to do a slight deviation. There is going to be a Q&A session, but I do think it is important that Nkosi at the back, if Nkosi could just come through and should give us some input. He is part of the Flotilla delegate, who participated in the 2026 Flotilla. I would like to invite him forward to actually give some input on his perspective and his involvement on this. Because we know Yusuf was a boat organizer, and Nkosi was delegated to Flotilla. Yes, they are comrades and you can see that. But I would like to invite Nkosi to actually, Nkosi, I'm going to give you freedom to speak here on what your outline of your Flotilla experience is.
For an opportunity. It's very nice to see you, man. I only saw you in Joburg and we were so busy and, it was just everything thrown around. And, Yusuf was one guy that welcomed us in Turkey around the port. When we first visited the port, he was the one to basically just give us an orientation of how the port feels like and what it is to be on the port. and he introduced us to various captains and various guys that were there, because he had been there for a number of days before we got there. So we just felt more comfortable through his orientation and through his introduction with Brother Kutub, who cooked for us. He cooked rice, and already in 2 days, yes, I couldn't take Turkish food. I mean, but then I was so happy Kutub was there. He cooked rice and chicken, which is normal to us. So, yes, look, you could never be the same after, being in such endeavors or such missions. You learn a lot, like how my brother has said. You learn a lot, and you become to appreciate, a lot about life. You begin to think there's actually more that you need to do. There's more that you need to pour out. You learn a lot, and what is very important and what is significant is, the spirit of the people committed to a mission that seek to save life, that seek to contribute positively, towards life. I once felt like when I was at Turkey, obviously, within the 2 weeks that we were still, attending training and attending the ports, loading those ships and, trying to help the guys around the ports. I thought, if the world could be busy with such constructive missions throughout, we wouldn't have any genocide, we wouldn't have any war zone, we wouldn't have any xenophobic, Afrophobic activities if it was about the commitment and the spiritual commitment of those guys that I saw at the ports. Each and every guy, it could have been from France, it could have been from Italy, US. We were all speaking one spiritual language. Our languages were so different at times. We could be frustrated because some guys will ask you to pick up a box, send it there, and you wouldn't understand, and he'll just throw his hand, more especially the Turkish guys. I think they're less tolerant in terms of language barrier. They'll just say, But at the end of the day, the spiritual language was one. We all knew that we were going to Gaza, and we all knew that we were going to Gaza for a peaceful humanitarian mission. So I don't want to be long, but it has changed me personally from the little that I've always observed. I mean, you spoke earlier, and even my comrade Yusuf here, he speaks about the degrees of inequality in South Africa. I think it's basically the foundation of it all. All the problems that we are basically facing now in the modern day South Africa are culminating from the degrees of the inequality, and obviously these capitalistic tendencies, which are very valid and visible all around the world, they are actually more valid and visible in South Africa. And we have lived at least for some 30 years, 32 years, which we called Freedom South Africa or Free South Africa, with so much of overlooking things. We haven't really dwelled into, after 1994, what it is that we were supposed to do to break the systemic oppression, because the systemic oppression still remained. But we were given freedom of movement, we were given perhaps freedom of access, but we were not given the rightful freedom. I always not argue, but I always have a conversation with some of my comrades, whom always have questions about what is taking place in South Africa right now. And you had it best, you explained it very well, but in Palestine, I visited Palestine last year in July for 14 days. And I experienced the very same type of racism that was taking place here in South Africa. In Palestine, it's even worse because they separate roads. I mean, I don't think we had separate roads here. I've never heard about it. We might have had separate beaches, bus stops, toilets and stuff. But in Palestine, there's a road that is dedicated for Israelis. There's a road that will be driven on by only Palestinians. But I then thought to myself, in early 1800s, at the very same era, when South Africans, the indigenous South Africans back then, welcomed Jan van Riebeeck or Vasco da Gama or whoever came first, they welcomed them with warm hands, warm hearts, to come into South Africa because they were asking for a place to rest, headed off to India for some spices. Then here in Cape Town, they found a place to rest. Then they gradually gotten themselves used to the place, and they called their friends, they called their sisters, they called their aunts. And the people, the indigenous people of South Africa welcomed them. Besides the little fights that they had, but they were welcomed. They made inwards movements, they settled in. And eventually, in the early 1900s, they thought they were good to rule and oppress the indigenous people that they met here. The same thing in Palestine. The Palestinians in the early 1800s, they welcomed the Jews into Palestine, warmly so. For whatever reason, they were kicked out from wherever they were kicked out, but they were welcomed in Palestine. And the Palestinians welcomed them. They found comfort, and later in the 1900s, the Jews developed an ideology of undermining the very same people that welcomed them. Through Zionism, they thought they were better, and now they are doing what they are doing to the Palestinians, which is what the very same thing that the people from Holland, from as far as wherever in the West, did to the South Africans. That is how common we as South Africans, more especially the majority, are to the Palestinians. I have not been into Gaza. I tried going to Gaza. And the reason I tried going to Gaza is because I want to speak about what I know. Like how I'm speaking about West Bank, Palestine. I am speaking about what I know. When I speak about the South African context, I speak about what I know. I wish that we could have made it to Gaza so that we can tell the people what we know and what we've seen. Not that I'm taking away what is happening or what we are seeing through any type of media, but it's actually always best to speak about where you've been and where you've experienced the stuff. So I'm not going to go into Afrophobic, xenophobic activities that are taking place here, but it is all the elements of the very same capitalistic system that you envisage, that we unite and we make sure that we put an end into it. And through that, we must dodge factors such as classism, religion, not to be the barriers to our unified approach into making sure that we declassify and we break the systemic oppression and the system that seeks to oppress the masses, which is us. We need to unite at all fronts, and we need to be more radical. Like I was listening to you, my comrade. You are right. We need to be there physically. We have done so much of creating awarenesses. We have done so much of sharing. We've done so much of everything of talking, but we need to be there physically. So thanks very much for an opportunity, Yash. That is all that I can share for now. Thank you.
Specifically on the acts of piracy, like the entire thing of the activists being captured on international waters and as far out as Greece, which was like 1,000 nautical miles from Gaza, and the way that they carried it out and the torture that everybody endured. And I know that as a movement, GSF tried that thing of like all eyes on the flotilla in order to prevent this. But there was hundreds of thousands of eyes watching a screen and nobody to prevent piracy. So firstly, a lot of people that I spoke to in terms of just the general population in South Africa, a lot of people didn't know about the flotilla, so we can blame it on social media. We can say that social media is the problem and basically not enough people knew about the mission or whatever that is. But if you set social media aside, what steps can be taken to ensure that the act of piracy is dealt with, or the prevention of the kidnapping of our activists is ensured.
You want to take all the questions first?
Let me firstly say that you can see the color of my hair, right? Often we lament within our circles, and yes, you know that is a constant lamentation about lack of enough young people taking up activism. And I want to say how inspired I am listening to you, that I can go back and say that's not quite true. And you're really becoming, you are an inspiring example of young people that can make an exhibition which we are board members of. Say how excited we are that we are hosting this, because we want to make this museum a living space for activists of all progressive causes. Bring people together, and young people especially. Young people across all our diversity, I think, is a critical function. I think the question of lawfare, which is being used by all forces, is something that we can use more effectively. In fact, there's a strong argument that our progressive constitution, with its Bill of Rights and all its progressive values, is used more by reactionary forces towards their causes than progressive people use it towards progressive causes. So when you talk about, for example, the South African using the Israeli Defense Force, why should it not be possible to collate the information and make an application to force the state to make an arrest, or at least issue a warrant for arrest if you can't, if the person is still outside the country? That's a kind of symbolic action that starts to change things. Of course, that lawfare requires a whole range of fronts to change the balance of forces with regard to the progressive agenda is concerned. I think you've spoken a lot quite correctly, both you and Josie and Yesh, about what's happening in our country at the moment, and we must not underestimate that risk. I mean, I'm quite worried about the shift in the balance of forces. And I suspect also that it's part of the reason why our government is being a bit more cautious, because what happened in the Oval Office was not very nice for all progressive thinkers, but it was reflecting some kind of political reality which you have to grapple with. And that comes back to dealing with our communities across the board, and poor people in particular. As activists, as we grow up, we learn Fanning said, the masses are not fighting for the ideas in your head. They're fighting to make their lives better for themselves and their families. And that's why when you talk about those actions, I really gravitate towards those ideas of having action. And it's not quite, in today's lives, in today's world, it's not quite as far as Mshlanga and Phoenix, Mshlanga and Commercial. In every community, I think that all of us here come from, there's probably an informal settlement within a few hundred meters of your house. And how are we reaching out? How are we building bridges? How are we saying that we can make lives better and build the solidarity that you're talking about? It's only that kind of unity that's going to at least mitigate, if not remove the risks that we are seeing so stark at the moment. So the last point is, I think this is the only part that I think is a question really reinforcing what you were saying. The last part is, last speech that Pravin Gordhan made before he passed away. He called for a progressive consensus. Until you have a progressive consensus, you can't mobilize a critical mass behind a united effort. And that's what I see, because we are fragmented. The fact that there are so few of us here, and I don't think we should underestimate the value of all of us coming together, even though we might but to build that critical mass, we need a progressive consensus. Why do we have this fragmentation? It's not only in this space of the Palestinian cause. We've got a conference of the left, debating whether it's really a conference of the left, but the point is we are fragmented, and we need to give some dedicated attention to that subject. Thank you very much for listening.